Senator, I listened carefully to what you said. I do not know a single member of this body that condones what happened on January 6th. And I want to be very clear. But the United States Supreme Court has been very clear. The United States Supreme Court has ruled that the United States Department of Justice overcharged many of the January 6th defendants using an Enron era obstruction of justice statute.
For all those who had been arrested. Mr. Patel was part of this lionization of these thugs who took over the Capitol or tried to take it over on that day. I don't want history to be wrong or misleading about what actually happened. Now what's happening? Questionnaires are going out in the Department of Justice and the FBI as to whether individuals serving our country in those agencies were involved in January 6 prosecutions. Yesterday,
What you just watched shows exactly why January 6th is still being used as a political weapon instead of being handled as a legal issue. Welcome back to Congress Lens. I'm Audrey, and today we're breaking down Senator John Kennedy's response to Senator Dick Durbin's criticism of Kash Patel and the events of January 6th. Let me be clear from the start. Nothing that happened on January 6th was okay. Violence against police officers is wrong. Storming the Capitol was wrong. And Senator John Kennedy made that very clear. But here's why this video is important. Kennedy wasn't defending violence. He wasn't excusing January 6th. He was asking a simple question that Washington often avoids: whether the Department of Justice overreached, overcharged, or politicized prosecutions. That is a huge distinction. If you care about accountability, the rule of law, and facts over feelings, you're going to want to stick around. Before we dive in, hit like, subscribe to Congress Lens, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our coverage of Capitol Hill.
secondly, the hearing of this individual raised questions that I'm sure a lot of people were surprised about. Why did we spend so darn much time talking about a musical recording, the J6 choir? We did because Mr. Patel basically denied any knowledge of the creation of this musical enterprise and the people who were involved in it. He was very proud of the musical selection, which he was playing at rallies for President Trump, and he was very much involved in calling these folks political prisoners who had stormed the Capitol on January 6th. And yet, when we asked him about him, he denied that he had any real knowledge of who was involved and what they were doing here. I look at, I'm trying to find one quote. He was on Steve Bannon's show. Mr. Patel claimed he didn't have anything to do with the January 6th prison choir, which includes January 6 rioters who violently assaulted police officers. Here's what he said to Steve Bannon, quote, "We got this idea to record the January 6 prisoners who recite the national anthem every night from the DC prison. Then we took that to the studio, so we mastered and digitized it." I mean, that's a direct contradiction under oath of his involvement. What difference does it make? A recording, come on, Durbin, move on. The recording was of political prisoners who stormed this Capitol and assaulted 140 of our best and brightest and most well-trained people that guard us every single day, the Capitol Police and their DC counterparts. They are trying to, some people are trying to lionize the insidious effort by these thugs who came and stormed the Capitol and were screaming out, "Hang Vice President Pence." I hope that we don't fall into this trap of trying to rewrite history as to what happened on January 6th. That was an atrocious display of political might, and at the expense of some wonderful people who guard us every single day in this Capitol. There are some here who wouldn't, when we went through this hearing, they disparaged the very thought that these people would be pardoned if they were guilty of violence against the police. One of my colleagues here called it absurd and hypothetical. Well, it turned out to not be so absurd. On the first day he was president, and the second term, Donald Trump issued a blanket pardon for all those who had been arrested. Mr. Patel was part of this lionization of these thugs who took over the Capitol or tried to take it over on that day. I don't want history to be wrong or misleading about what actually happened. Now what's happening? Questionnaires are going out in the Department of Justice and the FBI as to whether individuals serving our country in those agencies were involved in January 6 prosecutions. Yesterday, I met an individual who wants to be the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche. Made a good impression. Some of you probably met him too. He appears to be a well-versed, well-trained attorney. He was personal attorney to President Trump in one of his lawsuits. Back in the day, he was working for the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York. And I asked him, when you started working there, did they let you pick and choose the files you worked on? He said, of course not. You were assigned, particularly if you're low in seniority, you were assigned cases. So I said, to say that a person worked on a January 6th case, if they are new to the agency, is it possible that they were ordered to do that case? He said, it's possible. I said, should that be held against him? He didn't think it should, nor does anyone else, I hope. They did the job they were assigned to do. And now we have this kind of survey of the Department of Justice and the FBI to determine who was involved in the January 6 prosecutions. If this is an effort to punish them, dismiss them, or treat them poorly because they did what they were supposed to do as professionals, that's wrong.
All those in favor of approving subcommittees and subcommittee membership say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it, do have it, and committee rules are adopted. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to respond briefly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to respond briefly to my colleague, Senator Durbin. Senator, I listened carefully to what you said. I do not know a single member of this body that condones what happened on January 6th. And I want to be very clear. But the United States Supreme Court has been very clear. The United States Supreme Court has ruled that the United States Department of Justice overcharged many of the January 6 defendants using an Enron era obstruction of justice statute. And I don't see anything wrong with the Department of Justice under new leadership finding out or trying to find out why that happened. I'm curious. I know you're a good lawyer. You should be curious too. That's the only point I wanted to make.
Now let's talk about what Senator Kennedy actually said and why it matters. After watching the full exchange, one thing is clear. Senator Dick Durbin focused on emotion, while Senator John Kennedy stayed focused on the law. Durbin spent a lot of time criticizing Kash Patel for his involvement with the January 6 prison choir. He framed it as symbolic proof of moral failure and repeatedly emphasized how it offended Capitol Police and allegedly glorified violence. But Senator John Kennedy didn't question the seriousness of January 6. He didn't ignore the harm. What he questioned was the legal conduct of the Department of Justice. That is an important difference. Kennedy pointed out that the United States Supreme Court ruled the DOJ improperly used an Enron-era obstruction statute to charge many January 6 defendants. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. So when Kennedy says it is reasonable for new DOJ leadership to review why that happened, he is not being political. He is being responsible. Durbin framed the review as an attempt to rewrite history or punish prosecutors. Kennedy reframed it as a system correcting itself when mistakes were made. And that matters because if we accept overcharging when it suits us politically, it could happen again when it doesn't. Another moment that stood out is Kennedy's point that questioning DOJ decisions does not equal condoning violence. That is something everyone needs to understand. You can condemn January 6th and still question how prosecutions were handled. You can support police officers and still oppose legal overreach. You can want accountability and still insist on due process. Kennedy made that point in under a minute while others gave long speeches filled with emotion. There is also the concern about DOJ and FBI employees being surveyed about their involvement in January 6 cases. Durbin suggested this was a way to punish or intimidate them. Kennedy didn't defend retaliation. He questioned whether the prosecutors were pressured or guided into flawed legal strategies. That is oversight, not revenge. What Senator Kennedy showed here is rare in Congress. He can separate emotion from law. This was not about defending Kash Patel. It was not about defending January 6th. It was about protecting the integrity of the justice system. And that is why his response mattered. Here on Congress Lens, we don't excuse wrongdoing, but we also don't accept narratives that block legitimate questions. Senator Kennedy didn't excuse the past. He demanded accountability now. Let me know what you think in the comments. Was Kennedy right to push back, or do you agree with Durbin? We'll keep watching and bring you updates right here on Congress Lens.